Okay, good afternoon, everybody. As you see, we're having different members of our leadership team join us in different weeks and different issues. First, before I get into my statement, because I know you'll ask, I heard the White House was saying that 3 to 5 million illegals did vote. The president ought to realize he's president. Instead of talking about the election or how many people showed up at the inauguration, he ought to talk about how many new jobs he's creating. It's time to be president. And I heard that, well, second thing I'd say, when these falsehoods are told, our Republican colleagues have an obligation to reject them, not to skirt around them. The bottom line is simple. You cannot run a government. You cannot help people. You cannot keep America safe if you don't actually admit to the facts. Plain and simple. And unless that starts happening, this country is going to have real trouble. And it's not going to be Democratic trouble, Republican trouble, liberal trouble, conservative trouble, just trouble because of avoidance of the facts. Now I'll get to the substance of what I'm saying. First, I want to thank Debbie and Bernie for joining us. And we want to talk about some of the promises that President Trump made during his campaign that he's not keeping. Now, there are some promises we're glad he's not keeping, so we're not going to talk about those. But he's failing to deliver on one of his key day one promises that we Democrats have repeatedly identified as an issue that we want to work with him on, which is trade. All of us have had positions probably closer to the President Trump's than to President Obama or President Bush on trade. I know, I opposed NAFTA back in 1994, and of course TPP. But the president, when he ran, repeatedly said on day one, I'm going to name China a currency manipulator, but he has not delivered. Instead, he issued an executive action withdrawing from TPP. Now, everyone knows TPP was dead. It wasn't in existence. So withdrawing from TPP didn't create a single new job. Didn't change anything in the world of trade and all these companies that took advantage of us. How many new jobs did the president create yesterday by saying we won't do TPP? None. Nada. Zilch. If President Trump is serious about bringing jobs back to the U.S., he could immediately, on his own, without congressional action, label China a currency manipulator. If he's serious about bringing jobs, he would support Buy America provisions, and he would back our new $1 trillion infrastructure bill, which we announced earlier today. And he would convince Republicans to join him on those issues. They've opposed them in the past. China does what's ever best for China, even when it hurts American jobs and workers. We've seen that. And you can be darn sure they're going to keep manipulating their currency until we take strong action. It may go up for a few months if that's in their interest, but they'll keep manipulating it, and that is wrong. So, Mr. President, if you really want to put America first, label China a currency manipulator. And I reminded the president yesterday, I brought this up to him at the White House, that the lead sponsors of this bill were myself and Senator Sessions, now his nominee for Attorney General. So this is not a partisan bill at all. Debbie Stabenow, Sherrod Brown, Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, we were the 6 big sponsors. It was totally bipartisan. So last night, as I said, I mentioned this to the president, and I want to say this. He didn't say no. So I'm not going to tell you what he said, but maybe he'll do it. I hope and pray he does. We await real action on trade, which is one of the president's signature issues. But the bottom line is there's a giant gulf right now between what the president says he's going to do and what he actually does. On trade, job creation, and bringing back jobs to the U.S., we hope President Trump and Republicans in Congress work with us, not against us, and we stand ready to make this happen. Debbie.
Well, thank you, Senator Schumer. America needs to be exporting our products, not our jobs. And because of currency manipulation, we've lost over 5 million jobs. The primary focus is China, but I've also been very focused on Japan, which is a lead concern for the automakers that President Trump met with today. The opposition to TPP that came from the auto industry came because of currency manipulation. So I'm hopeful that he will take the action he can take by starting with China, having his Treasury Secretary make the position known that China is a currency manipulator, and then work with us to monitor what is happening in Japan as well. This is a serious issue. As Senator Schumer said, many of us have been working on this for years, and it's time, if the president wants to do something that really means something, that will keep jobs in America, he needs to tackle currency manipulation and help us bring jobs home.
Bernie.
2 points. First, regarding Mr. Trump's delusional statement that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in the last election. That is a total nonsensical statement. But what I fear about that statement, and what is something we should all worry about, is when Trump talks about 3 to 5 million people voting illegally, he is sending a message to every Republican governor in this country to go forward with voter suppression. The great political and democratic crisis we face now in this country is not voter fraud, it is voter suppression. And my belief is we have got to do everything we can to make sure that everybody in this country who is legally able to is able to vote. In terms of the TPP, I want to congratulate the millions of trade unionists in this country and their unions that fought long and hard to defeat the TPP, and I personally am glad that it is dead and gone. For the last 30 years, we have had a series of trade policies from NAFTA to PNTR with China, which have resulted in the loss of millions of decent-paying jobs in this country and a race to the bottom, which is lowering American wages, because many of the corporations want American workers to be competing with the wages in Mexico and in China. Race to the bottom. If President Trump is serious, however, about creating a new trade policy, he could very much lead by example, and frankly, this would have a profound impact on jobs in America. Right now, he has 3 manufacturing plants. He has manufacturing plants in China, in Mexico, and in Bangladesh, where he is paying his workers starvation wages. What a statement it would make to corporate America if he said, I am bringing those jobs back to the United States, and I, Donald Trump, will be paying workers in this country a living wage. Last point is, if we are serious about creating a new trade policy which works for American workers and not just large multinational corporations, we need a new trade policy. And I know that Senator Schumer and Senator Stabenow and I and many others are working right now on a trade policy which will create jobs in the United States, not in China. And I hope very much that President Trump will come on board and work with us as we revamp in a very fundamental way our trade policies.
Questions?
You're going to get a chance to vet your nominee pretty soon. It looks like you talked about the importance of diversity being in the mainstream.
Yes.
How heavily does the Garland experience of the last year weigh into your copy?
Look, clearly what they did with Garland was wrong, but we're not playing tit for tat here. We want a mainstream nominee because that's the right thing for America. And that's why I, for one, when we were looking at changing the rules, insisted that 60 votes remain for that position, because that would mean that you would garner bipartisan support. The last 4 Supreme Court justices got bipartisan support, and it's essential that the president do that. We would believe that, for instance, we're not going to say there shouldn't be a hearing. A hearing will bring out what this nominee is all about. We're not going to do what the Republicans did, but if the candidate's out of the mainstream, I can tell you I will fight, and my caucus will fight tooth and nail against them. Nope, no shouting.
What about the meeting at the White House last night? You said that there is an obligation by your Republican colleagues when they hear these quote, alternative facts or whatever they call them out. But you were in the meeting. You've known Mr. Trump longer than many of them have. Why didn't you call him out during that session?
I'm not going to say what we said in the session, but there was, yes, it was addressed. It was addressed. Yes.
What's your definition of mainstream, and was Justice Scalia mainstream?
Well, look, mainstream is something, it means that you follow existing law, that you don't use the court to change things around to your personal ideological likes and predilections. There's no litmus test, but that's what it means. And you have to go through vetting a candidate seriously and go through hearings to see if that candidate is mainstream.
Republicans said they're ready to move on.
You got to say.
Sorry. Republicans said they're ready to have floor votes on their President Trump's nominees. Are we going to see any today?
I think we have called a vote while you're speaking. Senator McConnell has called a vote with our okay about the nominee for the UN ambassador, Nikki Haley.
And Secretary Chow?
We're working. Look, there are a whole bunch of nominees that have real problems. Real problems. Just today, nominee Mulvaney said he would raise the age for Social Security. If we rushed through the hearings the way our Republican colleagues had wanted to, maybe people wouldn't have found that out. Isn't it the obligation of both the Republicans and Democrats to make sure we vet these nominees thoroughly? They're going to have huge power over the lives of every American. And to spend a little time seeing what they really think and what they would do, well worth it. These nominees are different than most. Let me please finish. We call this the swamp cabinet, billionaires and bankers. No cabinet has had so many people of such wealth. No cabinet has had so many people of such potential conflicts of interest, and no cabinet has had nominees who so diverge so dramatically from the president who chose them in their views, such as Mulvaney. Trump said he wouldn't touch Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Mulvaney, tremendous power OMB, says raise the age. Who's going to win? So we're proud of the job we're doing. And I know if I were our Republican colleagues, I want to rush as many of these nominees through in the dark of the night so people wouldn't know who they are and what their positions hold. That is not going to happen. Yes. The bottom line is we will move the nominees with relative speed who are not controversial, but some are controversial to some members, and any member has a right. Some people say Carson is not controversial. He's not on our list of 8. He's controversial to me. He wants to dramatically change housing policy. The president, in his first executive order, an hour after he gave this speech that he's going to be with the people, changed the rule that would raise mortgage costs to average Americans by $500 a year. So we're going to vet these nominees thoroughly. We're not being dilatory, but we're not going to just rush them through. These are all very important nominees. And to have a few days discussion on them, that makes sense. They're going to be in power for up to 4 years with tremendous say on how it affects Americans. Yes.
Senator Flake has a bill to protect DACA recipients that would also pair it with increased enforcement of criminals. I was wondering if there are any consensus among Democrats.
Well, there's a bill that I'm aware of that Senator Durbin and Senator Graham have, so it's a bipartisan bill to help keep our DACA people here, and I'm fully supportive of that bill. I'm not familiar with the bill you mentioned. Last question.
On infrastructure, there's potential agreement between Democrats and Trump on funding infrastructure, but what about the underlying issue of paying for it, and how does that fit in the fiscal 18 budget? Okay, so the bottom line is very simple. Many of us believe on our side that infrastructure should be a job creation program, okay? You don't have to if you're going to put money into the economy, particularly for good-paying infrastructure jobs, you don't have to pull the money out.
There are some on our side who say, let's close a lot of corporate loopholes to pay for it. There's unanimity on our side. We are not going to cut the basic programs that help average people, education and health care and things like that, to do it. And we'll negotiate if the President is serious. We've challenged him today to negotiate with us, and we'll come up with some way of dealing with the funding issue that we can all agree on.
Could that mean deficit spending?
Of course, yeah, there has been deficit spending on infrastructure since Henry Clay and since Franklin D. Roosevelt, okay? That's nothing new, and it's a great case. So you get the last one.
Last night, it's been described as a social event at the White House. I'm wondering, was that a refreshing change from President Obama?
You know, this idea...
Apologize for calling you the head clown.
Okay. Look, what I've said before is, for about a month, the President tried to flatter me. I'm his good friend. Then he started calling names. None of them affect me. The bottom line is values. Our values as Democrats and Americans will affect whether I work with him or oppose him, plain and simple. Thank you, everybody.